Okay, great. Thank you everybody for tuning into volume 2 of the OA event series, Data in a Downturn. In recent months, I've heard a lot of data professionals talk about the economic downturn. I've participated in a ton of discussions, and it inspired this event series. So last week we heard from Mark Minotti, and this week we are hearing from Niel Nickolaisen. I got the last name right. Did I not? Perfect. Nickolaisen. And just a heads up, no one has a crystal ball of what effects the economic downturns will have on our data professions, but we can learn something from history. And Niel Nickolaisen has experienced several downturns as a data professional, so he's going to walk us through what he's experienced in the past. He's going to share some insights based on data of what's happening in the current economic downturn. And he's also going to give us actionable tips and tricks on how to navigate this, how to be resilient, and hopefully, uh, best case scenario, just maintain our jobs and keep progressing as if we weren't in one. A couple ground rules or tips on how to get the best experience with this event. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see the chat and the Q&A. And if you have questions for Niel, you can add to the Q&A. I'll do an example. Niel, what? And then, boom, when it's time, I will add it to the screen, and Niel will be able to answer it. So, Niel, I know you pretty well, but could you please introduce yourself, and then we can get going on the event. Thank you.
Sure. And I appreciate this opportunity, Parker. And it's nice that this group exists. Associations and networks are essential. To be honest, I was a little offended when Parker reached out because he said he was looking for somebody who was so old.
That's what the last guy said, too. I'm like, dang it, am I telling you guys you're old?
That they'd experienced at least one economic recession. I thought to myself, the Great Recession was 2008, 2009. That's like 14 years ago. That's not that long. And I thought, for some people, it could be half your life for all I know. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity. There's my contact information. What I want to do today is just, Parker said you can just answer questions, you do a presentation. I opt to do a presentation just because, like Parker said, at my advanced age, I want to keep my thoughts coherent and together. So here's my agenda. Talk a little about who I am. Talk a little bit about the role of digital transformation in our economy today, because that affects, I strongly believe, your role even in a downturn. And so I want to talk about data and data professionals. And like I said, how it's different now than it was during the Great Recession. In addition to my regular role in IT, I'm also adjunct faculty or research manager at IDC Research. And I'm going to share with you some of the research IDC's done on what we expect to see from a recession perspective, length of perspective, severity of the recession, and also its impact potentially on jobs. And then just wrap up before we open up for Q&A with some personal advice based on my practically centuries of experience in IT on how do you protect yourself? What can you do to make sure that you're not affected should there be layoffs or any budget cuts and such? So anyway, and then through the Q&A, you can ask any questions you want at any time. I'd love for this to be interactive, but it won't be that interactive. But then when I'm done with my slides, which I hope will take no more than 20-ish minutes, then we can answer any questions you have. So with that, I'm going to plunge in. Just a little bit about me. I call myself the accidental CIO. I grew up, started my career primarily in traditional engineering, mechanical engineering. Actually, I have a master's degree from MIT in mechanical engineering. Got into project management. That led me into process improvement work. So I became a lean manufacturing, practitioner. I moved to Utah and was the VP of operations for a reasonably large consumer packaged goods company dealing with manufacturing, distribution, supply chain management, all that stuff. But what I really focused on each day was telling the company how pathetic the IT department was. And after a particularly bad incident with IT, with a new system they deployed that failed and shut us down, I met with the CEO and I said, John, 5 minutes from now, you need to make a decision. Either you fire the CIO and his entire staff or I'm quitting. And he came up with an alternative I did not anticipate. 5 minutes later, I was the CIO. And so I went from doing nothing with IT except complain about it, to suddenly be in charge of IT. And that's kind of defined my career. I've done a series of IT, I guess you'd call them turnarounds, where the IT department and its outcomes are not great. And so I come in and sort of rebuild, modernize, change the processes, change whatever. And an important part of everything I've ever done since I came from outside of IT has always been data. Done some really compelling data projects in my roles, and have done that now a number of times. Along the way, I've developed some expertise. I've authored a couple of books as part of Addison Wesley's Agile series, and probably hundreds of articles on data, analytics, practices, methods, the role of IT in an organization, the evolving role of IT leadership, etc. That's what I've done. And by the way, as an aside, don't buy my books. They're not worth it. They're not even worth it to me personally. The royalty agreement pays me like a fraction of a penny for every copy sold. If you're interested in the books, just send me an email and I'll send you a PDF copy. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's just go in on the real content. Now, I want to introduce you to this notion of digital transformation. It's a bit of a buzzword, but it's critical because as organizations have digitally transformed, they've also had to transform the way they make decisions. And part of digital transformation is digitizing our economy, which has also generated piles of data, which needs analysis. And so this directly affects, and I think really contributes to the rise of the role of the data professional. The idea is this: since its beginnings back in the 50s, organizations defined their process needs, and we developed technology to support those needs. So IT was always in a support role. Well, that changed once Al Gore invented the internet. Some of you are too young for that too. All of the possibilities, all of the opportunities for an enterprise were built on and created by technology. So that role started to change. I use this acronym SMAC: Social, Mobile, Analytics, Cloud. If you think about for the last 20-ish years, every innovation in our society has been something in social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. And those are all technologies. So as a result, the role of IT, the role of data has changed dramatically in our economy, and it's not ever going to go back. Now, the other thing that goes along with this notion of digital transformation is now, since everything's driven by technology, it's also at the pace of technology change. And the pace of technology change is rapid and accelerating. And so that creates another impact in our society, which is incredible ambiguity and uncertainty. It's hard to know what the future holds. We've now layered on this notion of not just a general uncertainty driven by the rapid pace of change, but disruptions. For example, COVID, a disruption. The Ukraine war is a disruption. You can go down the list of the disruptions that are kind of hitting us. All of this creates an environment where things change rapidly, and no one can predict the future. The reason I highlight that is since no one can predict the future, our decision making is hampered, but aided by insightful analysis of data. And that, I think, is what's important about your roles, and also influences what I think may or may not happen to data professionals during an economic downturn. So with that, just kind of recapping that, the digital transformation is that every organization, independent of its product or services, becomes a technology company. Our customers judge us against the best technology experience they've ever had. Not just comparing their technology experience with us, with those in our market, but the best experience overall. We move fast, creates uncertainty, the technologies change dramatically. And so we have to be able to consume, filter, process, analyze data and provide answers in an age of uncertainty. Here's a really rough diagram to show what I mean. Uncertainty is growing exponentially. So is data. We need to find that intersection where we can provide insight and provide answers, or at least guide, if not direct answers, guided answers in an age of increasing uncertainty. That's the value of data and data professionals. So the way I've approached it in my past is recognizing that we need some insight. We need to guide the organization. So the way I've approached it is, one, in interacting with the enterprise, with the organization, with the business, whatever organization you're with, what decisions would we like to be able to make? What data do we need in order to make those decisions? And then where can I get that data, and what analysis do I need to do to gain insight from that data? I've always focused my data, the role of data in my organizations, on improved decision making. That's the value. And that also helped me winnow the scope of what we're shooting for. Let's focus on the critical decisions. What can we do to improve the quality of those critical decisions? And this is across the board. Customer acquisition, customer segmentation, customer churn, error proofing, looking at supply chain options. How can we reduce our cycle time? How can we reduce risk? Everything that's happening in an organization today needs this data-based analysis. So that ties into your role. So what can we expect from the economy? Here's just some of the data I pulled out from IDC on the survey. They do surveys all the time. Every month they're surveying IT leaders, organizational leaders, marketing leaders, sales leaders, everybody. And I'm just focused in on the things that our surveys indicate about what the economy thinks is happening with a pending or already existing recession. But first, let me say this, having lived through a number of recessions, we're in uncharted territory. Typically, you know a recession starting because employment starts to struggle. Unemployment starts to go off, layoffs are happening, businesses, organizations sense something's coming. Today, it's different because even as we're talking about we're already in a recession, we're going into recession, there are millions of unfilled jobs. The thing that's also different for data professionals and technology professionals is the lesson learned during COVID was, if you haven't already modernized your business through technology, you need to, and you need to do it today. And so that created a massive demand for technical skills that is still unmet. So I'm going to share this data with you, these predictions from IDC, but remember, it's different this time than it's ever been before. Does inflation trigger job cuts? I don't know. Will the interest rates trigger that? I don't know, because we've still got this bank of unfilled jobs that we need to consume through, or at least not fill before we start cutting. So anyway, no one knows. No one has any idea. And anybody who tells you is lying, because we have never been in a situation like this before. So here's some IDC data. The first thing we asked people was, how long do you think the recession will last? And secondly, how severe will it be? So you can see the majority of people saying it's going to be less than a year. And the feeling was, a slide I didn't show you, is most of these business leaders and technology leaders think we're in a recession already. The majority think it's going to be moderate as opposed to severe. So just something to keep in mind. So looking specifically at the IT organizations, the technology organizations asked the IT leaders, if you had to cut, where would the cuts be? And you can see them in North America, the majority, or not the majority, but the plurality would be cuts in project costs and professional services. And then you can see software licensing, people, those types of things. We also asked the question of IT leaders, what do you expect would happen if you had to cut costs and during a recession? And the IT leaders said the majority said there'd be a targeted costs in IT. Not very many said there'd be increases in IT budgets. Some say it would be minimal impact, and others said there'd be across the board cuts. We asked the same question to the CEOs of those same organizations. You can see the plurality there said they would actually increase IT funding in a recession. So let's pause and think about that. Why the difference between the two? I think the real difference between the two is the lesson from COVID, like I said before, is if you haven't modernized and digitized your business and not used it to improve customer acquisition, to improve customer delivery, to improve your cost structure, to improve supply chain management, etc., you need to, and you need to now. And so, like I said, going back to that first slide, the role of IT has changed from being a support to enabler of all critical initiatives. So anyway, I just thought this was interesting. All right, next. From a staffing perspective, security professionals in IT are the most in demand. You can see where data professionals rank down lower. However, don't take that personally. Security professionals are most in demand because everybody now needs security professionals. The most difficult positions to fill, you can see number 2, are data roles, because there are fewer of you. Therefore, even though the demand isn't so high, they're the second most difficult position to fill. All right. One other thing as we talk about budgets and budget cuts and cost cutting, in past recessions, a lot of the IT services were on-prem, hadn't migrated to the cloud. We were using perpetual licenses for software. We were buying things like Microsoft Exchange. We weren't using Office 365 or Microsoft 365. So what we could do in the old days was we could defer maintenance. We could minimize our maintenance spend. We could decide to defer maintenance. That doesn't exist anymore. Those choices have been taken from us, because as we've migrated to the cloud and software as a service options, we're paying subscriptions that are based on both headcount or consumption and time. And so from an IT perspective, we've lost some options when it comes to where to cut. So we have to look at things like delaying projects, cutting projects, canceling projects, getting rid of contractors, reducing services, those types of things, and as a last resort, people. So it's just something to think about. The IDC survey, something of the data I didn't go into, shows that most organizations, when push comes to shove and they have to cut IT costs, are delaying rather than cutting. They're delaying projects and getting rid of contractors, consultants, and managed services, and preserving people. Remember, we just spent 3 years having a really hard time finding technical people, and most people still remember that lesson. So that should give us hope for our future as data professionals. However, here's my big caveat. Every economy includes lots of stupid organizations, and stupid organizations do stupid things like cut capacity in a time when they need it most. So it could be that your organization will cut roles, technical roles that they desperately need because they just don't know any better, or that things are so bad they're desperate. I'll just give you a quick example. During the early days of COVID, the hospitality industry got hammered. One of my CIO peers, he's the CIO of a large hotel chain. Everybody on the executive team took a 75% pay cut. He got rid of 75% of his staff. Why? Because hospitality got hammered. You couldn't even rent a hotel room because you couldn't travel. Other organizations boomed during COVID. So one of the things to think about is what's happening now is at a post-COVID right sizing. Let me give another example. Pre-COVID, Zoom had 30 million daily users. At the peak of COVID, they had 300 million, a tenfold increase daily users. They're now down to about 120 to 150 million daily users, much bigger, a 4 to 5-fold increase over where they were pre-COVID, but half of what they were at the peak of COVID. So you see technology companies like Zoom, like AWS, like Microsoft, like Salesforce doing staff reductions because they had to dramatically ramp up. So is that going to be across the board cuts, or is that targeted to those organizations that had to scale up so dramatically. I'll give you another example. Another CIO friend of mine works for a company that does outdoor products. During COVID, everyone, since they couldn't go to the gym, they bought stationary bikes, they bought kayaks, they bought mountain bikes, they got all kinds of equipment. They tripled their sales in 1 year. They're now coming back down to earth. So is that what fueling layoffs? I don't know. I'm just saying that's a data point, something to think about, because organizations learned that they must have technology. Are they right sizing now, or is this going to be broader than that? I have no idea, and neither does anyone else. So here is my personal advice. But as Aesop said, distrust unsolicited advice. Here's what I've learned in previous downturns, especially the Great Recession. First of all, from a data perspective, find and deliver a high impact, short duration analysis that really helps the organization succeed. And what I mean by high impact is what's 70, 80% of the solution in 20% of the time? What could we deliver quickly with available data that would identify and help us learn how to retain at-risk customers, eliminate supply chain bottlenecks, opportunities we have for process automation, FinOps in IT. The public cloud spending has become a major concern as people have migrated workloads to the clouds. Can we as data professionals help our organization identify where and where not they should be spending in the cloud? How can we increase share of wallet with customers? How can we improve product performance, service performance, etc.? Spend some time, build relationships with the line of business leaders or the people on their teams, and ask them, what are some nagging issues that an analysis could help you identify and resolve? What are some known but not analyzed opportunities? What decisions could you make with the right data? And then figure out a way to get them a not complete, not something that's going to take a year or two, but how could you give them some insight today that would help them in a downturn, either to change the cost structure or to expand market share? Let me give you a short example. Some years ago, I was the CIO at Western Governors University. For those that don't know, Western Governors University has an interesting model. It's competency-based. At WGU, it's all self-paced. If it's competency-based, it's self-paced. They start a new class of students, a new group of students on the first of every month. Those students have different competencies. If you're a WGU student, and you're taking, let's say, an IT project management course, if you spent the last 10 years as an IT project manager, it could be you are already competent, which means you could take the final on the first day and be done with that course and move on to your next one. Well, one of the things WG struggled with in this self-paced model was which students are at risk. Which students are having a hard time, because if a student didn't interact with the content or the university for a month, did that mean they were thinking of dropping out, or were they busy at work? Because like 98% of WGU students were working professionals. Well, we had this crazy idea that we could identify which students were at risk and also the preferred intervention to help them. But that was a pretty big thing. We had no experience with anything like that. So we started with a very high impact, short duration analysis. It was this: who should we admit? The humans had defined an admission model that had 12 factors. We did in just a few weeks a nice analysis comparing the profile data of students who had been admitted with the profile data of students who had graduated. Pretty simple, a simple regression. But what we learned was that in the human-defined model, the first most important factor in admitting a student turned out to be the sixth most important factor. The second was actually the ninth. The third was actually the 12th. And the most important factor wasn't even in the model. So for a few weeks and about $20,000, we refined, we rebuilt, we redefined the admissions model. The impact generated millions in benefits. But because before, to generate leads for WG, we took kind of a shotgun approach. Now we knew specifically who to target based on that admissions model profile. So we focused our lead generation on those specific targets, we had fewer students. We could focus our money. We spent less on marketing, but got higher enrollments. That built confidence in the university and really built the university's confidence in the data professionals on the IT team that we could do more. And so then we went to the big project of identifying, building, and delivering this student success model that resulted in, it cost a lot more than $20,000. It took more time, but the university knew we could deliver. And it resulted in improving graduation rates by 10 percentage points. Pretty dramatic. We ended up consuming a few thousand data elements about a student. We could identify which students were at risk. We deliver that back through the CRM system. So anytime anybody interacted with that student, they had a red, yellow, or green score. Red meant spend time with them. We changed the support model to focus on the at-risk students. So anyway, that's just an example. My other advice is network. If you're looking for a job boards are fine, but remember, they attract both the qualified and unqualified. So you've got to go beyond that. You've got to network. Recruiters are also great, but you need to build a relationship with several and make it personal. What I mean, spend time with them. Let them get to know you, not just send them a resume. Contact them and spend some time with them so they get to know who you are. And the other thing that's helped me with recruiters is I act as a connector. If a recruiter reaches out to me, one reached out to me a few months ago and said, hey, I've got this FinOps CTO job, thought you might be interested. And somebody I've worked with before, and I said, I'm not a great fit, but let me connect you to people who are. And so that builds that relationship with that recruiter that I'm helping him be successful or her be successful. And another thing I found to be incredibly useful is a lot of opportunities are never published. They're filled before they are. So join and be active in users groups and professional associations. And if you don't have one, start one, sort of like Parker did. So anyway, that's my advice. Network around. Let people know who you are, what you're working on, what you're good at. Build those relationships, and they'll benefit you for the rest of your career. And then my last bit of advice is when times have been tough, when we've had to do cuts on my teams, I've always tried in the last few years, because data and insight are so important, to protect the data professionals. But in general, if I have to make cuts, I never, ever put a name on the list of somebody who's made things better. They've improved our processes. They've improved our tooling. They figured out to optimize something, some way, somehow, not just on their work, but figured out how to make the work better. And so one of the things I'd ask you is, what can you do to make your organization better? What processes are clunky that you could help streamline or automate? And just in general, how can you make things better? And with that, that's the end of my unsolicited advice. If you have any questions, there's my email address. Happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. I've got a pretty extensive, at least in the Salt Lake area, network of IT leaders. If you want me to introduce you to anybody in my network, again, it's in the Salt Lake area, let me know. I'm happy to make introductions. And with that, I will stop sharing. I'll stop boring you to tears, and we can go to questions.
Thank you so much. One thing I learned beyond just the contacts and information that you shared is that was just an incredible presentation. So it just shows that you have a lot of experience analyzing
Well,
data,
what it
presenting
really
on
shows,
it.
Parker, is that you have low standards. And so it's easy for me to meet those low standards.
No, the way you explained it, the information that you provided, it was very easy to digest. I learned a lot, and I have a lot of questions. So one directly related to the presentation that I have is in the last few years, specifically in SaaS, in data teams that work on SaaS products, there's been a huge focus on building a data product that's automated, so you can more quickly generate long-term insights through analysis, and also create automations that allow you to do short-term insights and decision makings. Do you think during this recession that people are going to focus less on, or people should focus less on building data products and focus more on traditional analytics, kind of like what you did with WGU?
That's a great question. And I think, so here, I have no idea. Personally, I think the data products are really critical because one of the best, when I was the CIO at OC Tanner. OC Tanner was a massive transformation because OC Tanner was a manufacturing company that needed to become a software company. And the first data problem we had to solve was that the customers hated the data products that OC Tanner delivered to them. So that the customers themselves, these large financial institutions and other organizations, they couldn't assess the impact that employee recognition had on their organization. So one of the first things we did was make a data product, and that relieved a lot of the pressure on my team, so we could then go do the more traditional analyses, because this was the burning platform we had to solve first. We lacked credibility with our customers and with the organization because our data tools, our data products that our customers consumed were so bad. But I think you can do things in parallel. I really do. If you focus on, I still like the high impact, short duration. We'll get to perfection over time. If in the asymptote, what can I do in a month that would deliver 70% of the value? Well, let's do that. And I still think that's important. But I do think the customer experience, we're ruled today by the customer experience. What can we do to make the customer experience better? Insights and ease of use. Don't make people work to get insight.
Okay, that was great. So really, what I gathered from that is don't focus so much on building a data product for the sake of building a data product. The thought process should always be, how can I generate as much value as I can, and ideally a short amount of time, the 80-20.
Yeah, the way I've over time learned to sort of balance my portfolio is I want to make progress in 4 areas. 1, improve the customer experience. 1, improve the employee experience. 1, improve the IT experience. And 4th, build future capability. So from a data perspective, what can I do to improve the user experience, the customer experience? What can I do to improve the employee experience? Maybe that's helping finance with some insight. Maybe it's helping supply chain management. What can I do to help IT? What analysis can I do that would help us identify what the bottlenecks are in our product development life cycle, for example? And then what are some things I just know, things I'll need, capabilities I'll need in the future, and I should work on them today, so when the future comes, I've got something in place. So that may be some of these data products, or maybe the platform that's going to support a data product in the future, because I don't need it today, but I want to start building it so I'm not behind when we finally recognize we need it. So anyway, that's how I've approached it. Those 4 pillars. And you sort of, maybe initially it's 60% customer experience, 15, and 10. And maybe a year later, I focus more on the employee experience, but I want to be doing something in all 4 at any point in time, assuming I have the resources.
Okay.
Or the bandwidth.
Thank you for answering that. And we have a couple questions from the audience. I'll throw the first one on screen. Are you able to see that? I can read it to you if you can't see it. It's from Kristen Scott. Data roles are difficult to fill due to candidates lacking skills or lack of candidates applying overall. That was a question. I read it as a statement.
In general, I think it's a lack of skills, although I think it's a lack of skills, but I think it's getting easier and easier to acquire the skills. In the past, I've always developed an apprenticeship program where we would take people with some level of training or certification or experience and put them into a formal apprenticeship program. And I think the tooling that we have now helps get people up to speed faster. And so I've always been willing to take a chance on somebody who expresses an interest. and say, if you have the aptitude and attitude, we can develop your skills. So, but I'm not sure how many organizations think that way, to be honest. So I don't know if I even answered your question. That's kind of frightening. I do think it's lack of skills. And I think, there's a high demand. There should be a high demand. So I just don't think there aren't enough people.
That's refreshing to know. If the thought is there's still demand, that's good. I want to be in a recession where my profession's still in demand.
And I think if you look at, I'm the chair of the advisory board for the IT, academic IT side of a large university. And I told them 12 years ago, I said, you need to focus your curriculum in one of two or both areas. One is information security and the other is advanced analytics. I said, because those are never going away, at least in my lifetime. And the need for both will only grow. And I think that's turned out to be true.
And we got another question from Josh Gallant. When considering starting a professional society, is it worth doing a local in-person group in this day and age?
I think you could start that as a core, certainly. I don't know if it's a requirement anymore because we're certainly used to remote and virtual. But what I found is we built a really strong professional association of IT leaders in the Salt Lake area. And I focused on finding the 2 or 3 or 4 people who are passionate about building the network. And among this small core group, we've grown to hundreds. And so I don't think it matters that much, especially if it's not geographically constrained. There's no reason for you to not do what Parker's already done. But it takes some work. You just got to start find people via LinkedIn or whatever, and just reach out and say, hey, would you be interested in helping build this? So find those 4 or 5 passionate volunteers and leverage that.
And we got another question from Daniel Behringer. Hope I said that right. Let me add that to screen. There we go. Do you have anything to say about democratizing data within an org? How do you make inroads within departments of the biz that may not necessarily understand the value of data analytics in support of core biz drivers?
Yeah. So let me take the first part first. In my perfect world, my data professionals create the opportunity for end user self-service. But that means that we've got to identify the data, process the data, validate the data, etc. I want that to be part of their role because I've always thought it was a waste of a talented data professional's time to write reports. Hey, Niel, I got this report. Can you move column C over where column D? No, do that yourself for crying out loud. You don't need somebody of my skills to do that. So how can I get to, and also I never wanted to be the bottleneck. So let's democratize the data and then reserve the incredible talents and skills of my data professionals for the really intense and intricate analyses. That's how I've approached the role. How can I get us not be a bottleneck to self-service, and then use our big brains for the things that no one else can solve. The things like the WGU model, where we came up with a student success model, just the things like that. Now, the second question is, how do you build those relationships? I think back on my career, doing those high impact, short duration, just going to somebody, going to the controller and saying, where do you and your team spend a lot of time? Well, to be honest, we really struggle with days sales outstanding analysis. Okay, maybe I can help you do a quick analysis that would show who the most at risk or the riskiest customers are to do business with, and maybe we can profile them. And maybe we can feed that back into the sales cycle so that we identify the characteristics of the customers who are going to be a struggle to collect money from. And maybe we can put a filter on the front end so we don't actually do business with them. And maybe we can do an analysis shows who the great customers are, who always pay on time. And maybe we can put a sales filter in place so we're targeting those from a marketing experience. Just a simple conversation like that lights that person up, and you own them for the rest of their lives because you made their life better. You help them improve their process through an analysis that they themselves not only can't do, but never even thought about doing. And I think about my career and how we've elevated data in the organization and my data teams. It was doing those quick little things like that. Once working for a SaaS company, and we had our implementations when we implemented the software took a decent amount of time. And so my data professionals just analyzed what are the characteristics of all of the configuration options, what was the golden set of configuration options, sorry for that noise, the golden set of configuration options that 95% of the customers always chose. Oh, great. Let's start with that as a baseline. Let's walk in with those configuration settings already set and then deal with the 5% that are variable. And we took our implementation timelines from 4 months to 4 weeks. That allowed us to add more customers without adding people. It's just stuff, little something, I shouldn't say little stuff, but things like that. What is the problem you're struggling with? What analysis can we do that would resolve that issue? Or what's an opportunity you feel you can't exploit? Maybe we can do an analysis and exploit that opportunity. And that's how you become irreplaceable, to be honest. I hope that answered the question.
I believe it did. Daniel, you let us know. Next question, John Jimenez. With company layoffs, data teams have been cut, but those that have remained have to do the same level of work. That's a statement? Yes.
But at the same time, I think that creates the opportunity to identify some of those process improvements. How can we do this better? How can we automate this? Who can I work with to automate this? How can I get to more self-service? Maybe, like Daniel said, maybe a lot of the demand on me is report writing or dealing with report requests. How can I get out of that business?
And John has another question. How do you manage upward to C-suite and communicate that more resources are needed or that things need to be prioritized?
That's a bigger one. I've spent my entire career trying to sort that out. What I've found is essential is what I would call visibility, transparency. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but one of the things I started doing about 12 years ago that really helped is communicating to the entire organization the status of everything that we were working on. Everything. And so you could see how full, quote unquote, full we were. If I've got 90 high priority projects, first of all, it's an oxymoron to say you got 90 priority one projects. But we always had 90 priority one projects. Okay, well, let me communicate to the rest of the organization what those 90 are. And that way they could see what we were working on, what we were getting done, but also see if they wanted to build capacity, we needed to add capacity. And so I think that transparency and visibility, one of the things I think that would help is just share with whoever you're managing up, here's what we're working on, here's its status, and here's its assumed priority. Now, if we got this wrong, let us know. And if you want more from us, you'll have to decide. It's kind of the bathtub analogy. The bathtub's full. If you're going to put something else in, say you got to take something out or the water's going to spill over. And so you got to decide if these are the right priorities. But I've become very proactive in telling the organization, here's what we believe are the right things to work on. If we got it wrong, let us know. And if you want to add to it, you can either add capacity or you can take away some of the things we have already got on the list. That's our reality. And if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to send you some samples of some of the things I use to this day to show transparency and visibility of where we are.
And you guys are welcome to add any last minute questions. I have one more. So I'm definitely someone that learns from failures a little better than I learned from successes. And I'm curious what, you don't have to go in depth on a project, but what's an example of a project that you were really confident on that you failed? Obviously, like stakeholders were disappointed. How did you navigate that failure?
Um, uh, one that's fairly recent is we really needed to improve our reporting tools for the organization, and decided, we took a risk. It was a bad bet. We decided to use an open source tool, and the open source tool could not handle the data load we put on it. So we worked on it for a couple of months, and it just did not perform. It couldn't perform, wouldn't perform. And in retrospect, I don't think we did our due diligence well enough up front. We didn't do some initial load testing to see if this thing would perform like it needed to. And the way I've always dealt with this is just blunt honesty. Guess what, organization? I blew it. I screwed up. We've learned our lesson. We hopefully will never repeat this again, but that's not a promise. That's a goal, that we won't repeat it. We won't fail again. But then we just backtracked and started over. And it happens. The lesson I learned is it would have been nice to fail faster. We failed after a few months. It would have been nice to fail in a week, because we invested a lot in trying to make this work. And we also were sort of influenced by sunk cost bias that said, we've already invested so much, let's make it work. And so we were kind of beating this dead horse technology for a while, but we should have just recognized the signs and just taken our lumps and started over. So I learned, fail faster and don't be influenced by sunk cost bias.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that is all of the questions. People are thanking you in the chat. Niel, thank you so much. I learned a ton. This is one of my favorite events that I've hosted. So thanks a ton.
Well,
I might have to reach out to you again to do something.
Okay. And I'm glad you're networking. It's critical. It's critical. And think about how you can become influential in your profession, either locally or more expansively, and add value. To me, I've never been laid off in my life. Through the dot-com bubble bursting, through the Great Recession, through COVID, I've never lost my job, because I think they felt like I was good enough at what I did that it would hurt if I left. And so that's always been the driver for me. Am I adding value? And am I adding value today? And if not, what can I do to add value tomorrow? And that's sort of been my motivation. And I think that's generally true for anybody, is especially when it comes to data. The organization has incredible needs. Very few organizations have their data act together. And so there's a lot of ways you can help the organization be successful. In fact, I think data and data professionals are the key to present and future success for any organization, because the reality is we live in uncertain times. Now we live in disrupted times, and we're swimming both in ambiguity and in data. How do I make sense of the data to help me through the uncertainty? And it's not going to change. The pace isn't going to slow down. The disruptions aren't going to ease up. We live in a state of chaos, and it's never going to change. It's only going to get worse until the zombie apocalypse.
And that is the main message.
That's the only thing that's going to slow down the craziness, but it's going to slow it down and replace it with a single type of craziness.
So less about downturns. The next one's going to be more specific about the apocalypse.
Exactly.
So
what can you do to survive in a zombie apocalypse? Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm going to. This is all recorded.
I'm happy to help. Reach out if you need anything.
Yep. I'll send everyone an email with the recording of this event, and I'll give you Niel's contact information. And if you're not already a member of the OA Club, we'd love for you to join. We've got over 2,500 data professionals in there, and we do a lot of events like these. So I'll include information about that in the email too. Niel, thank you so much. And
thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
See you guys.